Okay, so study unit 2, okay, personal financial management. Here we're looking at measurement and assessment of personal financial performance. Okay, financial performance, think back to your accounting. What does that refer to? That's financial position. Performance is? Yes. And how do you measure profit? Income and expenses. Good. Okay, so in this study unit, we're looking at measuring and assessing the personal financial performance, i.e., what are we actually doing? All right, so what represents the doing? It's the budget. Okay, because do you agree? The budget is actually the plan. Right, the budget is what you're going to be doing. Right, what actually happens in reality is the actual. Right, and then we always compare budget to actual, because budget to actual will either give me a good or bad scenario. Okay, good scenario if the actual is less than budget for expenses. Bad scenario if expenses are more than budget. That's not a good thing to have. Okay. Alright, so you told me about the financial position. Okay, assets, liabilities. How do we calculate net worth? Yes, it is. Okay, yeah, well, that's for companies. But you're right, owner's equity is A minus L. Right, assets minus liabilities gives me owner's equity. Okay, and that's net worth. Right, so from a financial management point of view, in terms of personal finance, what do individuals need to do? Companies do the same thing.
The assets must be more.
Correct. Okay, so more assets and less liabilities. Right, because that creates wealth. Okay, that's the accumulation. Okay, so buy more property, invest more funds, and that generates more assets. Okay, because assets generate income. Okay, and that's a separate statement. Right, so a little bit of accounts there. Accounting is practical because it can be applied, okay, to the real world. Right, individuals also have assets. Individuals also have liabilities. Right. Before we look at this in terms of total assets and total liabilities, okay, this is looking at you as the individual. Notice this is analysis. Right, so let's have a look at this video here, okay, which is looking at financial planning in terms of the big picture. Okay, and let's have a look at, in terms of what we need to plan for and how do we measure it. What are some of the things we need to consider? Let's have a look.
What direction is your wealth curve heading? We all have a lifetime wealth curve potential. We start out as a young person when we begin to become aware of money and wealth. Every decision we make in our lives impacts this curve. We begin to earn money, put it in an investment vehicle, hoping to earn a high rate of return. I set on a future where we can accumulate a massive amount of money, leave the rat race, go sit on an island, while our assets continue to grow, till one day we get the opportunity to pass this on to the younger generation. Perfect. Then reality sets in. You realize that there's a tremendous amount of financial pressure pushing down on your wealth curve and its potential. If the wealth curve were purely mathematical, it would always grow exponentially, but it doesn't. Taxes, federal, state, FICA, Medicare, sales tax, consumption tax, excise tax, more and more taxes. Fees, bank fees, surcharges, investment fees, transaction costs, commissions, surrender charges, hidden expenses, interest costs on credit cards and mortgages and student loans and car loans. Market volatility creating this average versus actual return gap. Insurance costs, car, homeowners, disability, health insurance, life insurance, insurance losses above coverage limits, lifestyle, and our inability to keep it in check for some. Loss of employment, underemployment, inflation, technological changes, cell phones and data plans. What's next? Planned obsolescence. Everything we own is wearing out and will need to be replaced at a much higher cost, unfortunately. Theft, identity theft, money being stolen, our college, plus our children going to college, our parents not being prepared, having to move back into our homes, or us having to help them out or care for them financially or in reality, our siblings not being prepared, or our kids never launching, staying in the home. Events that we dreamed of, weddings for our children, sweet 16s, we think they're going to cost X and they cost Y and a lot more. Black swan events, these global macro destructors of wealth, not to mention the impact of long-term care, disability, premature death, death at life expectancy, lawsuits, estate taxes. All of this pressure is constantly mounting and becoming larger as our wealth grows and our incomes grow. The sequence in which these things come and the outcome cannot be predicted. For many people, this pressure becomes so great that their curve collapses and begins to deteriorate their wealth, and often they run out of assets. If you look back at the curve, the most important drivers of wealth were the ability to save money and the return times the length of time that it could sit there. When we retire, we remove the savings rate, so now the curve is being propped up by one component as opposed to two. And then economic conditions change, and maybe that return collapses, like we're experiencing now. What direction is your curve trending? Most advisors and people spend all of their time focusing on the rate of return on their money. To be successful, you need to factor all of these pressures into your plan. If you're not, you don't have a real plan. At Smallwood Capital, we believe that a strategic plan must include a complete evaluation of these potential pressures on your plan. Through a collaborative effort, you have the ability to create a plan that is better prepared for this pressure. For more information, visit our website and request a free copy of our book.
So that's a video in terms of financial planning. Okay, so what does financial planning involve? Is it a simple, easy to accomplish process?
Not really, no.
No. Okay, how many topics did the guy talk about?
Quite a few. Tax,
a lot.
Pension, house, car, kids, parents.
Correct. Okay, it went on and on and on. And why? Because things change. Okay, nothing in life is ever certain. Okay, marriage isn't always certain, right? Life isn't always certain. Okay, death is a reality potentially. Okay, job, no job, healthy or not. What else? Taxes. Okay, what else did they mention? Recession. Okay, the economy. Right. So, in reality, people make decisions based on what?
What the current situation is.
Correct. Okay, so what is your current situation and what do you need to try achieve in that current situation? Okay, and there's lots of external factors that will affect you in terms of your financial planning. Right, you might have a plan that says, well, income's going to do that, so my wealth is going to do that, because if I'm earning more, I should be saving more. Right, but when you earn more, right, there could be more expenses. Right, more taxes, correct. Okay, and that creates a bigger pressure, okay, on the actual wealth plan, okay, or financial plan. Right, so what do we need to do? We need to do analysis. Okay, so it's great having this plan, but if you don't know what the rate is, if you don't know what the return is, if you don't know what the time frame is, you can't implement that plan. Okay, so it's one thing having the plan, you need to start somewhere. Right, so here we're looking at the annual financial statements for an individual. This is, i.e., the start. Right, before we can achieve anything, we need to know where we are. Okay, so net worth is your assets minus your liabilities. Okay, so I want you to think of some of your assets. I want you to think of some of your liabilities. You might not have any liabilities, you might not have any assets. Okay, then think more broad in terms of your family, okay, or your household. It doesn't matter, right? But think about a scenario where you're looking at assets and you're looking at liabilities, right? For yourself, right? You don't have to share this with me, or it's personal. It's something that you would have to do. Okay, so maybe quickly now, just think about it. Right? If you want to jot down some things, you can. If you want to just think about it, that's also fine. But what I want you to consider is, which is bigger? That's the key. I want you to think which is bigger. Okay, have you thought about it?
Assets will be bigger, total assets, because
Okay, good. All right, so your assets you've mentioned, okay, are bigger. Right, so A is bigger than B. Okay, so is that a good position to be in?
Yes.
Okay, right, now the next step that we need to consider, this is net worth, right? So let's say you have an asset. Let's just talk about laptop. Okay, let's just put that in.
I used to, I bought a laptop and I was thinking about that as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you do it, yeah.
All right, yes. In accounts, last semester. Yes, okay. All right, so let's just say laptop then. Okay, so if we're thinking laptop, right, is that an asset? Yes. Okay, does that add wealth? Yes, because it's an asset. But now the question is, that asset is worth something. So let's put a price to the laptop. Okay, let's say 5. Okay, so if the laptop is worth 5, is that wealth? Yes, because it's an asset. But something else that you need to consider is, what is this used for? Okay, i.e., what do assets do? They generate income, or they have the potential to generate income, whether you utilize those assets or not. Okay, so are you using the laptop to run a business? Are you using the laptop to sell goods online? Are you using the laptop, okay, to do presentations? Are you using the laptop to play games? Are you using laptop to watch YouTube videos? Are you using the laptop to watch film, television, okay, streaming, etc., right, entertainment? So the thing is, what is the asset actually used for, right? That's something we need to consider, because it's one thing having assets, it's another thing using them effectively, okay, because we need to generate income. Okay, some companies can have huge amounts of assets, and those assets are idle. They're not doing anything, and that creates a problem. Okay, because have assets, that's great, but let those assets do something. Okay, so i.e. reap a benefit, a reward. Okay. Alright, so now we spoke about net worth. We just calculated it. Alright, employment of capital. There's the note. We just spoke about it. How are we invested? Right, so are we investing in assets that are generating income? Okay, or are we buying assets that aren't? Okay, that's the employment of capital. How are we invested? Right, so let's say, let's say one individual. Right, so let's say you are the individual. Okay, and let's say you've got 2 vehicles. Okay, how many vehicles can you drive?
One at a time.
Correct. So do you agree, if you're one individual and you have 2 cars, is that a good utilization of assets or capital? No, because for you as an individual, you can't drive more than 1 car. Right, but if you add another person to the mix, okay, then great. Your girlfriend can drive the other car. Okay? So, if we're looking at assets, assets need to be utilized. 1 person to 2 cars doesn't make any sense. Okay? 2 people to 2 cars, that makes sense. Okay, because now we're employing capital more effectively. Alright, so a few other considerations in terms of assets. Some assets offer depreciation. Okay, and we know depreciation is good from a financial management point of view or a tax point of view, because that can be claimed as a wear and tear allowance. Okay, so that's not always a bad thing, but it's only for companies though, businesses that operate. Okay, tax is also a consideration, and liquidity. Right, certain assets are more liquid than others. So do you want to have lots and lots of houses? Well, yes, because that's wealth, but no if we're looking at liquidity. Okay, because houses aren't liquid. It takes a few months, right, or years even, to sell a house. Okay, so if your consideration is liquidity, houses aren't the best option. If you're looking at assets that appreciate, then houses could be a good option. Okay, it depends on your consideration, your preference. Okay, right, let's consider income now and expenses. So again, for yourself, okay, think about income. Where does income come from? Okay, it could be an allowance, it could be chores, it could be Part-time work, it could be anything, okay? Maybe a bursary, okay, a scholarship, that type of thing, income, okay? And then expenses, what expenses do you actually have? Right, and then again, let's consider this, the total, okay? Which is bigger?
I'm trying to take this expensive because I'm not working.
All right, so for you, expenses would be slightly bigger than income, okay, because you're not working currently, right? But do you still have a form of income? Okay, interest. But wouldn't you get an allowance? So maybe your parents give you an allowance for books, for food, for etc. Yes. All right. Okay, so there you go. So for you, in your situation, expenses would be more than income. Right, so if expenses are more than income, what do we need to do? Possibly, but maybe also be more careful with what we're spending money on. Budgeting. All right, so if the income is limited, okay, try limit the expenses as much as possible. All right. Okay, then we've got a note here about Monopoly. Have you ever played Monopoly?
Yes.
Great. Okay, what's the goal? What's the goal of the game?
Get as much money as you can. Be rich. And
Not the most money, the property, yes.
Without the property, you want the money.
Correct, yeah. So Monopoly is all about buying those plots and putting those houses and hotels on, right? Okay, and that's financial planning in a game. Okay, so when we're looking at financial planning, all we need to do is this. Okay, make the assets as big as possible. Right, and obviously the person with the most wins. Right, but those assets can differ. You can have hotels, you can have houses, okay, you can have those utilities, right, all those fancy things on the game in terms of Monopoly. Okay, and Monopoly is actually a board game representative of real life. Okay, what do we do in life? You mentioned it earlier when I asked about your goals. You want a family, you want a house, you want a car, you want income, you want assets, etc., right?
Yes.
And that's Monopoly. Okay, buying little assets and getting the assets to generate. Okay, so when people land on those blocks, okay, they have to pay rent because you own the hotel or you own the house. Okay, or you own the utility. Okay, so that's income that you get from owning the asset. Okay, so wealth is all about assets. Okay, getting as much of those assets as you can, i.e. accumulation. Okay, and then at some point in time, inverted commas, you win the game because you've got more than enough assets on the board, okay, and all the other players are paying you for landing on all your hotels. So then eventually they end up bankrupt. All right, and that's Monopoly. Okay, it's a representation of finance, okay, in the real world. It is very good. It does take a long time, and it can get quite what's the word? People argue and fight, and it can get a bit hectic. Okay. All right. So personal financial budget. What is a budget? You gave it to me earlier. It's a plan. It's a plan of what? Inflows and outflows. Okay. So in accounting, we created a statement of cash flow. Do you agree an individual can also create a statement of cash flow? We just call it a budget. Okay. Right, so how do we manage and control money? We need to budget. So how do we budget? We need to do this. We need to get involvement. All right, so if you're budgeting for the family, should the family be involved?
Yes.
Why?
It concerns them, and I need to know what they can do and if they can do it.
Correct. Okay, so let's say husband and wife. Okay? If the husband and wife are married, okay, surely the husband and wife should make financial decisions together. Okay, the husband shouldn't make all the decisions, and the wife shouldn't make all the decisions as well. Okay, both should be privy to all the information. Okay, so when you're in a family situation or a company situation or a personal finance situation, you can't always make decisions based on you. It must be taken into consideration in terms of the bigger context. Okay, so for example, if we use your example, you mentioned mom and dad and yourself. Do you have any siblings?
Got a brother.
You've got a brother, older, younger?
Younger brother.
Younger brother. Okay, so there's two of you. Right, you're the older brother, you've got a younger brother. Okay? In terms of the family budget, all right, so your younger brother is probably the one who wants stuff. He's probably, I don't know how old he is, but let's just say he's okay, 20. Okay, so he's not a little kid. Okay, I'm just thinking.
You think a little kid, sorry.
Yeah, okay, but that's fine. Right, okay, let's assume your brother was a lot younger. Okay, let's say your brother was 10, okay, or half his age, 11. All right, so if he was 11, okay, what do 11-year-olds do a lot?
I think they mostly play computer games.
Okay, they play games, so they want stuff.
Friends' houses.
Yeah, they want stuff. They go to the shop, they want sweets, they want stuff. They want new, okay, they want new games, they want new consoles, etc., right? Okay, so do you agree if the family is budgeting, all right, mom, dad, you, and brother, okay, are going to have to determine where are we going to be spending the family's money, okay, the budget. Right, so if we give this child everything he wants, if we give this child all the games he wants, if we give this child all the sweets and treats that he wants, okay, that's not going to help the rest of the family, right? Okay, in terms of paying for other things, okay, water and lights, the rent, etc. Okay, so involvement is key from everyone. Everyone needs to be part of the process, right? Because if everyone is part of the process, everyone's on the same page. Okay, so if the budget is limited, okay, everyone should know what the budget is and where you're spending the money. Okay, you shouldn't be spending the money irresponsibly because that creates a problem. Right, what else do we need in terms of budgeting? Needs to be organized. There needs to be proper admin. Okay, there needs to be good communication, i.e., if you've bought something. So, for example, right, let's think about, let's say a relationship. Okay, so your spouse, okay, so husband and wife, the spouse, the wife, is responsible for maintaining the household, buying household goods. Okay, what happens if she doesn't buy household goods, or she doesn't buy enough household goods, and she's spending all the money on shoes and clothes and jewelry and other? Okay, does that create a problem? Possibly. Okay, not always. I mean, sometimes they're allowed to buy certain things. Okay, but communication is key. All right, so when couples get divorced, it's probably because of finance. It's probably because of money. That's normally one of the big causes of divorce, okay, and separation. It's normally money matters, okay, and it's normally because they don't talk about that stuff. Right, husband and wife normally talk about other things, okay, living and staying together, kids, future, holidays, etc. Right, they don't often sit down and talk about money. Okay, it's not a nice topic to talk about. No one really wants to sit down with their spouse and talk about income and expenses. Right, and where are we going to budget and so on. Right, but it's something that needs to be done. Okay, because if there isn't good communication, problems can arise. Right, because now the thing is, well, we need to pay for this, but now you just bought a lot of luxury goods. It creates a problem, creates a situation. Right, let's try buy both luxury goods and spend on necessities. Right, but it has to be within the budget. Then that creates, let's say, peace within the household. Okay, because there's communication. Okay. Right, so budgets need to be realistic. You can't budget with R1 billion, okay, if the budget is only, let's say, R1 million. Okay, so R1 billion is obviously a lot more than R1 million. It needs to be within budget, and it needs to be realistic. Okay, planning and time. Why is that important?
You have planned expenses, but something income affects it. It's not longer to spend it.
Okay, so a budget is for now or the future?
That's what you meant, sorry.
Yeah, no, that is fine. Your response is correct. It's just, you're just looking at it differently. But if we're talking about a budget, Is it now or the future?
It's in both. Thing.
A budget is always future.
Future.
Yeah. All right. Because current, what you have now in terms of spending is the accounts. Okay. So if you spent on X and Y, those are accounts that you would then provide for in terms of your financials. Okay. But a budget would be a projection. Okay. So I'm budgeting for this. I'm budgeting for that. Okay. So are you saving for anything specific? Yeah.
Not really, no.
Okay. Are you budgeting for anything specific?
No.
Not at all. Okay. All right. So in terms of planning and horizon, is forecasting important? No, well, just in general. Doesn't it too personal? Just in general.
Forecasting is you don't ask in the future.
Exactly. Okay. So with planning and time, all right, things can happen in terms of time horizon and planning horizon. So if you're budgeting for 12 months, well, a lot can happen over 12 months in terms of changing prices. Okay, so budgets need to be reviewed. Budgets need to be flexible in terms of the application. Okay, so you can't be so, let's say, strict in terms of, well, I only budgeted X for groceries this month. Okay, but we have a drought and price of goods go up. Okay, so now, well, the budget was this. I'm not going to spend more than this, but then I'm not going to buy all the groceries that I need. You can't say that. You can't do that. Okay, so flexible application means the budget is always going to be reviewed depending on external factors. Okay, so the price of petrol goes up. The price of goods and services go up. Okay, if that's the case, we need to be flexible in adjusting our expenses to try still maintain a budget, but give flexibility, right, to provide for certain, let's say, unknowns that can occur. Okay. Human behavior, people behave differently. Right. Some people love buying goods. Okay, so those are the shopaholics. Right. Other people don't. Right. Human behavior will affect the budget. Right. So if you know you're a bit of a shopaholic, i.e., if you go to the mall, you're going to have to buy something. Okay? That's human behavior. So now you've understood that human behavior, i.e., I'm a bit of a shopaholic. Right? I'm going to have to buy something from somewhere, okay, if I go into the mall. Right? If you know that's part of your behavior, then you need to try budget for that. Right? So maybe as part of your budget, put a line item that says unexpected expense. Okay, give yourself a budget. So yes, I know I'm going to be buying something when I go into the mall because it's impulse. Okay, it's part of how I behave. Okay, so if that's the case, budget for it. Say, well, I'm going to spend X every time I go to the mall, right? Because it's part of my behavior, right? It's part of the budget now. It becomes part of the plan. Okay. The problem is, problems arise when we don't realize what we're doing. That's the problem. Okay, so when you don't know what you're doing, that's when problems arise. Okay, so for example, someone who's got an alcohol problem, let's say an alcoholic. If an alcoholic doesn't admit they're an alcoholic, okay, they'll never ever go for help. Do you agree? If someone is a shopaholic, okay, they'll never ever admit they have a shopping problem. Okay, if someone is a smoker, alright, that's part of their behavior. Okay, you can't really change that behavior. You need to understand it. Okay, you need to, because if you're, let's say you're a smoker and you're trying to stop smoking, okay? If that's the case, you're not going to want to put yourself in a situation where there's secondhand smoke. Okay, so you don't want to be around people that are smoking, because if there are people that are smoking, it's probably going to make you want to smoke. Right? Or if you're an alcoholic and you're around people who are drinking, you're probably going to want to drink. Okay, so it depends on your, let's say, your situation and your interpretation, right? And how you interpret those places, because when you don't have enough information, right, in terms of knowing enough about yourself. So the point I'm trying to make is you need to acknowledge the problem first before you can find a solution. Okay, so when looking at a budget, okay, if you have a problem with spending too much money on entertainment, okay, if you don't acknowledge and identify that, you're always going to spend too much on entertainment. Okay, and that's something to consider in terms of the budget. Right, and that's part of the follow-up. Okay, bit of limitations. Is the budget limited? Yes, because it's how can I say, it's made up. Okay, a budget is made up. There's no right and wrong budget. It's customizable. It changes. Right, so assumptions are used. It's not automatic. Okay, and it relates to the future. No one knows what's going to happen in the future. We can budget for X for petrol and fuel, but in reality, it's probably going to go up in price. Okay, they're saying petrol might come down next month. That's what they're saying in terms of the economists. Okay. Right, so consider the advantages of a budget. We spoke about it. It's insight. Okay, it's information. Right, you don't know what the problem is if you can't measure it and you can't identify it. Okay, so if you maintain a logbook, okay, or if you maintain a, let's say, a notebook of all your income and expenses, you would be able to identify where are you spending most of your money. Okay, and that's very insightful in terms of trying to identify or uncover problem areas. Okay, we need to understand what we're doing, right? And the budget creates that ability to interpret our behavior. Okay, so where are you spending money? All right, so now in terms of a task, what I'd like you to consider is over the next week or even month, okay, I'd like you to just make a mental note. Either keep all your receipts or keep all your till slips, okay, in terms of places where you've bought, okay, money, or places where you've earned money, depending on the situation, okay, because it's actually quite interesting to see what happens. So before, when I hosted this, when last we hosted, we had a crash course last semester. We had, I think the semester before, we had weekly classes. Okay, but when we had weekly classes for this particular module, I had a student that always bought coffee. Okay, loved coffee. Okay, and they didn't just buy one cup of coffee a day. They bought 4 cups of coffee a day. Okay, so 4 cups of coffee a day. How much is a cup of coffee? Okay, let's quickly bring up the calculator. Okay, so let's talk about 15 to 16. So let's say 20 rand. Okay, 20 rand a cup of coffee. Different places might be different amount, doesn't matter. Let's just say 4. 4 cups of coffee, 80 rand. That's 80 rand a day. Okay, there's 5 days in a week. Okay, obviously the student came to lectures 4 days a week. All right, so we won't use 5, we'll use 4. Okay, times 4 days a week. That's 320 rand a week. Times that by
4 weeks.
Okay, 4 weeks in a month gives you 1,280 rand a month, approximately. Right, so almost 1,200 rand is being spent each month just on coffee. All right. Okay, that could be seen as a bit much. Okay, for some people it might be too much. For others it might not be enough. Okay, maybe 4 cups of coffee is not enough. Okay, some people love coffee. Okay, so it all depends. Right, but do you agree, if I times this now by 12, that's 15,360 rand a year being spent on coffee. Okay.
That's ridiculous.
Right.
It sounds about 12, it is 4.
Yes, it sounds about 12.
It should be something 13, but it's 52.
No, we looked at a month. We times by 4 weeks in a month.
Yes, we do about 12.
And then we times it by 12 because it's 12 months.
Yeah, but it's a 5th week in some months, so it makes it 52.
Okay, possibly, yeah. Well, let's ignore, yeah, let's yeah, no, you're being very accurate, which is good. So it's probably even a bit more.
Yeah, it is more.
Okay, but it's approximately, let's say, 15,000 rand a year just in coffee. Okay, and what would you do with an extra 15,000 rand a year? That's enough to go on a holiday for one person. Nice holiday for one person. Flights and so on. Okay, possibly. So maybe a local trip. Okay, but if it was international, maybe a nice trip for one person. Yeah. And that's a trip. So you could go on a holiday, either as in terms of your example, for a whole family, or for one individual every year, okay, if you just cut back on some of your coffee.
Sure.
All right, so it's interesting. So the point I'm trying to make with that example is I want to get you guys thinking about where is it that you're spending money. Okay, because can I control my income? Not always. Okay, so income can't always be controlled, but your expenses can. Right, you have power in terms of where you spend money. Okay, and you need to determine where am I going to spend it and how much should I be spending. Okay, so am I going to be spending 15,000 Rand a year on coffee? Right, if that's part of the budget, then sure, do it, by all means. But if it's not part of the budget and you're still doing it, there's going to be a problem. Yeah. Okay. All right, so there's budget, forecasting, here's actual. Right, so when you do this, we need to look at the data now in terms of what am I currently doing. Once I've got data, then I can budget. Well, now I can say, well, okay, so for that particular student in that semester, approximately 15 grand a year on coffee. Okay, if we're looking at reducing that expense, okay, we need to treat the actual cost. So why is that student buying so much coffee? It's probably because they love it, okay, in terms of the taste, okay. It's probably because it's something that keeps them going. So coffee, yes, might be an expense, but it's an expense to do something else. So if this student didn't have 4 cups of coffee a day, okay, that student probably wouldn't have done as well in terms of results. Exactly. So there's the trade-off in terms of where are you spending the money. So buying coffee is not necessarily a bad expense so long as it's assisting you with something else. Okay, and that's what we need to look at. So we need to look at expenses, but it's more, those expenses are associated to what? All right, so if I'm buying coffee, right, because it helps my studies, that could be a good expense. Okay, if you're buying, what else? Something useless. Can you think of something useless? Sweets. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's say you're a student wanting to go on diet. All right, but you're buying huge amounts of sweets. Okay, that's not good for your diet. So there, your budget and also your goal might not be aligned. Okay, so you're a student wanting to lose a few kilos. Okay, but you're still buying tons and tons of sweets. Okay, the budget and the goal aren't aligned. So there we could say, well, looking at what I've actually spent money on, have a look at last month. I've spent a lot of money on sweets. Okay, I want to get thin, but I'm eating sweets every day. Okay, so for that individual, it doesn't work. Okay, the budget isn't in line with their goal. Right, so budgets always have to be in line with their goal, and to identify what your goals are currently, you need to look at the actual. Okay, where are you actually spending your money? Okay, so if you're spending your money on education, that's because that's a goal. If you're spending your money on entertainment, that's because that's the goal. The goal is to have fun, okay? Or the goal is to be educated, okay? Or if you're spending money on holidays, okay, it might be because you want to travel. That could be the goal. All right, so expenses aren't good or bad. It depends on what your goal is. Okay, so if you're the type of person that loves traveling, okay, spending money on traveling isn't a problem. Okay, you're not going to cut back on that expense. Okay, because it's something that resonates with you in terms of your goal. Okay. All right, so there's the note we spoke about, actual versus budget. Do we need to budget? Yes. Do we need to meet the budget? Okay, we should try and meet the budget, but things that are unexpected can arise. Okay, so did we meet the budget? So, okay, I phrased the question slightly different. I said, do we need to meet the budget? We should try and meet the budget. Okay, did we meet the budget? That's the reality. Okay, so in reality, okay, did I spend more than I expected? Okay, so for example, if you said I'm only going to buy 4 cups of coffee a day, but you actually end up buying 5 or 6, did you meet the budget? No. Okay, something unexpected happened. You bought more than you thought you were going to. All right, so what do we need to do in order to manage that? Here's the note. Record system. Administration. Keeping track of expenses. Right, so How many people keep all of their till slips and expenses? Companies do it all the time. Why don't individuals do it?
Not really necessary because it's government's not going to use. You just keep the relevant ones like water and lights and basketball ones. You don't want to keep them.
Okay, but should you normally keep them?
For 5 years, I think, yeah.
No, I'm saying should you normally keep all those till slips?
Not really.
Well, if you wanted to do a budget, an accurate record-keeping system of your budget, you would. Okay, so, and that's the point I'm trying to make, is that most people don't know what they're spending money on. It's because they don't keep track of those expenses. Most people take the till slip, crunch it up, throw it in the dustbin. Yeah, right. And then they'll never ever know what they spend money on. Right, so most people, in terms of financial planning, should have a way of monitoring their expenses. Because as I said earlier, you're never ever going to know there's a problem if you don't have the information identifying it. Right, so if you've got a problem of spending too much money on entertainment, or too much money on coffee, or too much money on whatever it is, okay, it's probably because of what? Not knowing, perhaps. Okay, not knowing how much you're actually spending. Okay, so when we did that exercise with that student, the student actually realized, well, that's a lot. That's a lot. Okay, I mean, the student wasn't paying for it. It was the parents. Okay, the parents gave an allowance, so in actual fact, it wasn't really their money, but it is theirs because they're still spending it. Okay, but it's not the same because they didn't earn the money. It was given to them. It was an allowance. Okay, it was something. It was like a allowance. Okay, so for them, it wasn't too much of a factor. But once we did the number crunching, it was actually like a realization. It was actually like, it was something that was like, that's actually a lot type of thing. So the thing is, the student received the allowance, so they thought, well, they can spend it. It's fine. Right, but the thing is, if they saved some of that allowance, the allowance would have been more, perhaps. Okay, maybe they could have bought themselves something nice that they really wanted. Yeah, 15,000 rand laptops are really top of the range. The new Core i7s and so on. Yeah.
I got that one here for 11,900 on special.
Okay. All right. So what features does it have?
It's a Windows 10. It's i7, 1 terabyte hard drive.
What generation i7?
I'm not quite sure on myself. I'll look up to
4th, 5th edition, 6 maybe. I know 6 came out quite recently. Okay, yeah. Okay, good.
It's got a
Right.
CD and
Yeah, powerful. That's good. Okay. Yeah, when you were last semester, yes. Okay. Okay, great. All right. So last bit is the case study. All right. So I want you to think about the budget. So what are the Kamalos going to be? So Mr. Kamalo is 31. He's the breadwinner. Okay. He started a new job as a financial manager for a company. Okay. He's married to Eva, 28. Okay. They have 2 kids, 5 and 7. So pretty much what we saw on that family not so long ago. Okay. Then there's a list of data. Okay. So where would they have got that? They would have got that from their statements. Okay. They would have kept bills. They would have kept documents, and they would have identified this. Okay. So this family has come to you for help with evaluating their financial performance, and they would like you to assess their current situation. So point number 1 is assess or analyze the current financial position. That's A. Okay, I want you to do that, okay, in terms of A. And then B is help them draw up a budget. Give them some recommendations. All right, so what could they do better? What suggestions would you give this particular family? Okay, that's the exercise. And then that's the last slide, just in terms of the study guide.